Angela walked through the bustling airport, her suitcase rolling smoothly behind her. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. People hurried past her, some dragging heavy bags, others clutching boarding passes and coffee cups, all rushing toward their flights. Despite the crowd and noise, Angela moved calmly, her eyes scanning the signs for her gate. She had flown many times before, but something about today felt tense, almost like the air itself was heavy with expectation. She stopped briefly at a kiosk to check the screen for her gate number. Her flight was on time, but the line to board was already forming. Families with children, business travelers with laptops, and groups of tourists all waited patiently. Angela adjusted her scarf and took a deep breath. Airports could be stressful, but she liked the rhythm of travel, the anticipation of a journey, the sound of announcements echoing through the terminal, and the sight of planes lined up on the tarmac like obedient soldiers. As she joined the line, she noticed a uniformed police officer standing near the entrance to the boarding area. He seemed to be observing the passengers closely, his eyes scanning faces in a way that made some people glance away nervously. Angela had seen airport security before, of course, and she had always followed the rules without complaint. Today, she thought, would be no different. The officer approached her as she reached the front of the line. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm, "step aside for a moment." Angela looked at him calmly and nodded, moving a few steps away from the other passengers. She was curious, not frightened, though she could sense a slight tension in the air. "Do you have any identification on you?" the officer asked. His tone was clipped, and he glanced around as if to make sure no one else was listening closely. Angela reached into her bag and handed him her ID. He looked at it, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "I need to ask you a few questions," he said. "It won't take long." Angela kept her voice even. "Of course," she replied. "I'm happy to cooperate." She had always believed that politeness and calmness could often defuse tense situations. She smiled slightly, hoping it would help, but the officer did not return her gesture. The questions began routine enough: where she was going, why she was traveling, if she had any checked luggage. Angela answered each one clearly, keeping her hands visible and her tone steady. But then, as the officer flipped through her ID, his expression changed. A shadow of disdain crossed his face, and the words that came next caught her off guard. "You don't seem like you belong here," he said, his voice low but sharp. "I'm surprised to see you in this line." Angela's eyes widened slightly, though she maintained her composure. She had encountered ignorance before, but hearing it so plainly from a uniformed officer made her chest tighten. She forced herself to take a slow breath and respond calmly. "I'm here to catch my flight, just like everyone else," she said. Her words were measured, and her eyes met his steadily. "I have every right to be in this line." The officer paused, as if he had not expected her to answer with confidence. Then he shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Angela didn't catch it fully, but the tone was unmistakably dismissive. A few passengers nearby noticed the exchange and looked over curiously. Some whispered to each other, unsure of what was happening. Angela felt the weight of their stares, but she refused to let it shake her. She reminded herself that she had traveled through airports all over the country and had faced all kinds of situations. This was not the first time someone had underestimated her, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. "Is there a problem here?" a man's voice asked from a distance. He was a fellow passenger, carrying a small backpack and looking concerned. Angela shook her head gently. "No, thank you," she said. "I've got it under control." She appreciated the gesture, but she wanted to handle this herself. The officer's tone became sharper. "Step over here. I need to check your bag." Angela complied, placing her suitcase on the floor. She watched as he ran his hands over the exterior, opening compartments and peeking inside. Her laptop, clothes, and personal items were all in order. She stood quietly, her mind calculating each step, considering her options if the situation escalated. Then came another comment, this one louder and more pointed. "You should be careful where you walk," he said. "Not everyone around here is as cooperative." Angela froze for a fraction of a second. The implication was clear, and the weight of the insult pressed down on her. She felt a surge of indignation but refused to let anger dictate her response. She had learned long ago that composure often held more power than confrontation. Taking a deep breath, she replied evenly, "I am just following the rules, officer. I hope that's acceptable." Her voice carried across the small crowd that had begun to form. A few people nodded subtly in support, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. The officer's face tightened, but he said nothing, seemingly caught between authority and embarrassment. Angela stepped back, reclaimed her suitcase, and straightened her scarf. She could feel the eyes of others on her, and while that could have been uncomfortable, she chose to see it as support rather than scrutiny. She had faced many challenges in her life, and each one had taught her that dignity was often the best response to ignorance. At that moment, she made a quiet decision. She would not allow this officer to ruin her day or diminish her sense of self-worth. She would respond, but not with anger. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, pretending to check a message. Then, casually, she dialed a number she knew the officer could not anticipate. While the officer was still focused on other passengers, Angela spoke softly into her phone. "Hi, it's me," she said. "I need you to handle a small situation at the airport." Her words were calm but carried a quiet authority that made the listener on the other end sit up straight. She explained the incident briefly, her tone steady, leaving no room for exaggeration. As she ended the call, she tucked her phone back into her bag. She knew that the person on the other end had the ability to address the situation with fairness and authority. She glanced at the officer, who was now distracted by another passenger, unaware of the power shift that had quietly occurred. Angela allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had not raised her voice, had not caused a scene, and had maintained her dignity. The line moved forward, and Angela continued toward the gate. She kept her head high and her steps measured, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. The incident had shaken her momentarily, but she had handled it in a way that reflected her values, calm, composed, and assertive without aggression. She reminded herself that strength was often quiet, and today had proven it once again. As she approached her boarding area, she noticed a few passengers glancing her way, some with curiosity, others with respect. She felt a renewed sense of confidence. Airports were places of transition, not only for journeys across the sky but for small personal victories as well. And today, she had taken one. Angela found a bench near the gate and sat down, her suitcase beside her. She watched planes taxiing across the runway, each one a reminder that life moved forward, no matter the obstacles. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had faced an unjust situation with grace and had quietly ensured that it would be addressed. That sense of control, combined with her calmness, brought a smile to her face. The airport buzzed around her, but Angela felt a sense of inner peace. She knew that the next steps would unfold as they should, and she had done everything possible to maintain her dignity and fairness. Today, she had turned a potentially humiliating experience into a moment of quiet empowerment. And as her flight was called, she stood, adjusted her scarf once more, and walked toward the gate, ready for the journey ahead. Angela moved a few steps away from the officer and the line, pretending to check her phone. Her hands were steady, and her face remained calm, but her mind raced. She had already decided what to do. This wasn't just about herself anymore, it was about ensuring that injustice didn't go unchecked. She knew exactly who she needed to contact. Her fingers quickly dialed a familiar number. The person on the other end picked up almost immediately. "Hello, Angela," a warm, authoritative voice said. It was her husband, Marcus. His calmness and confidence always seemed to ground her, no matter the situation. "Hi," Angela said quietly but firmly. "I need your help at the airport. Something happened, and I need you to step in." Marcus's tone shifted instantly to concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked. Angela explained the situation in simple, clear terms: the officer's inappropriate comments, his dismissive attitude, and the small crowd that had started to gather around. She made sure her description was factual, avoiding emotion or exaggeration, so Marcus could act decisively. Marcus listened carefully, his voice steady but firm. "Don't worry," he said. "I will take care of this. Just stay calm and continue waiting near your gate. Do not engage further unless necessary." Angela nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Just hearing his voice reminded her that she was not powerless. She had someone on her side who could handle the situation professionally. While still on the call, Angela casually adjusted her bag and looked back at the officer. He was speaking to another passenger now, unaware that Angela was no longer just a regular traveler. She had always known that knowledge and composure could be powerful tools, and she had never been afraid to use them. "Marcus, he doesn't even realize who I am talking to," Angela whispered, more to herself than to him. She didn't want to escalate the situation by saying too much out loud. Marcus chuckled softly on the other end of the line. "Then it's a good thing you called me. Let's make sure this ends respectfully and properly." Angela hung up and slipped the phone back into her bag. She felt a renewed sense of calm. She had done everything she could to remain composed, and now the next steps were in Marcus's capable hands. She returned her attention to the line, observing the people around her. Some were still curious about the earlier tension, others had returned to their own routines, unaware of the incident that had just occurred. She realized that the officer had no idea the balance of power had shifted. He continued to speak in his authoritative tone, but Angela knew the situation was about to change. She could feel a small, quiet satisfaction building inside her, not from revenge, but from knowing that fairness and respect would soon be restored. A few moments later, a representative from the airline arrived. They were dressed in a neat uniform and moved with purposeful confidence. Angela recognized the approach; they were clearly responding to her call. The representative's eyes met hers, and she nodded slightly. Angela stood up to greet them. "Good morning," the representative said politely. "We understand there has been an issue. Would you please follow me for a moment?" Angela smiled, her voice calm and steady. "Of course," she replied. She could see the officer now glancing over, his expression changing slightly, though he still did not know what was happening. The representative led Angela to a quieter area of the terminal, away from the busy line and the eyes of the other passengers. "We take all matters of respect and conduct very seriously," the representative said. "Could you please explain exactly what happened?" Angela recounted the incident clearly and professionally. She described the officer's comments, his dismissive attitude, and her calm response. She emphasized that she had remained composed throughout, but that the behavior was inappropriate. The representative listened carefully, nodding in understanding. "Thank you for explaining this clearly. We will ensure the proper steps are taken," they said. Angela felt a sense of reassurance. She had done her part in addressing the situation calmly, and now the airline had taken responsibility for resolving it. Meanwhile, back in the line, the officer still had no idea what was happening. He continued to interact with other passengers, but there was a subtle shift in the air. Some passengers had noticed the airline representative approaching Angela, and they could sense that something significant was unfolding. Angela, however, remained composed. She knew that part of her strength came from her patience. She did not rush or demand immediate attention, she allowed the proper channels to handle the situation while maintaining her dignity. This quiet confidence drew respect from those around her. A few passengers gave her encouraging nods, acknowledging her poise in a difficult situation. As she spoke with the representative, Angela could feel the tension gradually easing. Her initial shock and indignation had transformed into a sense of empowerment. She had faced unfair treatment, but she had not allowed it to dominate her emotions or dictate her actions. Her composure was not only a shield for herself but also a signal to others that unfairness would not go unnoticed. While they spoke, the representative made a discreet call to airport security. "We have a situation with an officer at Gate 12, they said quietly. Please handle it professionally and ensure proper conduct." The officer, still unaware, continued his routine, but the quiet wheels of accountability had already begun turning. Angela felt a sense of quiet pride. She had learned long ago that standing up for oneself did not always require loud confrontation. Sometimes, the most effective approach was composed action combined with strategic communication. By contacting her husband and involving the airline professionally, she had ensured that respect and fairness would be restored. After a few minutes, the representative returned. "The matter is being addressed," they said. "You may continue to your gate when ready." Angela nodded, feeling a wave of relief. She thanked the representative politely and walked back toward her gate, her steps calm but confident. She knew that the officer would soon realize that his behavior had consequences, and that fairness had been restored without any loss of dignity on her part. As she walked, Angela reflected on the incident. It had been an uncomfortable moment, certainly, but it had also reminded her of the importance of calm determination. She had faced a situation that could have been humiliating, but she had turned it into a demonstration of quiet strength and professionalism. Her actions were not about proving superiority but about maintaining integrity and ensuring fairness. Passengers continued to glance her way as she passed, sensing the calm authority she carried. Angela felt a renewed sense of confidence. She had navigated a tense situation with grace, and she knew that the resolution would serve as a reminder to others that respect and professionalism mattered. She arrived at her gate and took a seat, placing her suitcase neatly beside her. Her heart was still steady, and she felt a sense of inner peace. The officer, she knew, would soon face the reality of his actions, but Angela's focus remained on the positive, the power of composure, strategic action, and clear communication. As she waited for her boarding call, she glanced at the planes outside, shining in the morning light. Today had been a lesson in patience, courage, and dignity. She had stood her ground without anger, and in doing so, had ensured that respect would prevail. Her journey was not only across the skies but also through a moment of personal triumph, demonstrating the quiet power of integrity in the face of unfairness. Angela settled into her chair, a small, satisfied smile on her face. She knew that the situation would soon reach its conclusion, but she was content in knowing that she had acted correctly. Composure, clarity, and courage had guided her through the morning's challenge, and she felt stronger for it. As the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, she stood once again, ready to continue her journey, confident that she had handled the situation with grace and intelligence. Angela returned to the line near her gate, her suitcase rolling quietly behind her. She walked with calm confidence, her posture straight, and her face composed. She could feel the eyes of a few passengers on her, curious about what had just happened. Some had noticed the airline representative who had discreetly spoken with her, while others simply sensed the quiet authority she carried. Angela did not mind the attention, in fact, it reinforced the power of remaining composed even in tense situations. The officer, still unaware of the events unfolding, continued his duties. He approached another passenger, asking routine questions, his tone firm and commanding. But Angela knew that everything was about to change. She had already informed her husband, Marcus, and the airline representative had taken the necessary steps to ensure that the situation would be addressed. The officer, confident in his position, had no idea that he was now under scrutiny. Angela's mind replayed the earlier interaction with the officer. His dismissive tone, the comment that had struck her with indignation, and the small crowd that had begun to notice all of it had been unsettling. But she had handled it with grace, remaining calm and polite while quietly taking action behind the scenes. Now, as she approached the officer, she felt a sense of quiet anticipation. She did not hurry or rush, she walked steadily, exuding confidence and control. As she reached a point where the officer could hear her clearly, she spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Excuse me, officer," she said, making sure her tone was polite but firm. The officer turned, his expression showing mild irritation. "Yes?" he asked, clearly expecting another routine question or complaint. Angela smiled slightly, a gesture that caught him off guard. "I wanted to let you know," she began, her voice measured and confident, "that my husband is the owner of this airline." The words landed like a gentle but firm wave, and the officer's expression shifted instantly. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, he seemed unsure how to respond. The weight of her statement hung in the air, powerful yet unassuming. The officer's mouth opened, then closed, as if searching for words that would somehow undo what had just been revealed. Angela maintained her calm, meeting his eyes steadily. She did not raise her voice, did not gesture aggressively, she simply stood there, composed and confident, letting the truth speak for itself. Passengers nearby began to notice the subtle change in the atmosphere. Some whispered quietly, sensing that a significant moment was unfolding. The officer's face turned a shade paler. His previous confidence, his sense of authority, seemed to falter in the presence of Angela's composed revelation. He stammered slightly, trying to find words, but none seemed adequate. Angela remained polite, her voice steady as she added, "I hope this helps clarify the situation." The calm professionalism in her tone contrasted sharply with his flustered demeanor. Nearby passengers began to watch more closely. A few had already witnessed the earlier tension and were now intrigued by the sudden shift in dynamics. Angela noticed their attention but did not let it distract her. She understood that true power often lay in calm action and quiet authority, rather than loud confrontation. Her composure alone sent a clear message: respect was expected, and unfairness would not be tolerated. The officer, now realizing the implications, took a step back. His previous comments and dismissive behavior suddenly felt heavier, more consequential. Angela's calm, confident approach had effectively reversed the imbalance of power. What had started as a tense, uncomfortable encounter had transformed into a moment where respect and accountability could not be ignored. Angela continued to stand, composed, allowing the officer to process the revelation. She could feel a subtle sense of triumph, not born from anger or vengeance, but from the knowledge that she had acted wisely and respectfully. The officer, now visibly flustered, muttered something under his breath, perhaps an attempt to save face, but it was clear that the moment had changed him. A few passengers who had been observing began to whisper softly among themselves. They admired Angela's poise and the quiet way she had turned a potentially humiliating situation into a demonstration of dignity and composure. Some nodded subtly in her direction, as if acknowledging the strength she had shown. Angela met their gaze briefly, offering a small, polite smile. She felt a sense of quiet satisfaction in knowing that her actions were making an impact, not only on the officer but on those witnessing the encounter. Meanwhile, the airline representative who had earlier spoken with Angela returned to ensure that the situation was handled appropriately. They approached the officer discreetly, speaking in a low, professional tone. The officer's demeanor shifted further as he realized that he was now being held accountable by the airline. His previous sense of authority, based solely on his uniform and position, had been replaced by the understanding that respect and professionalism were essential in this environment. Angela watched the interaction from a few steps away. She remained calm, observing the unfolding events with a sense of quiet confidence. She did not need to intervene further. The combination of her composed revelation and the airline's involvement was already guiding the situation toward resolution. She understood that patience and careful action often carried more weight than confrontation. The officer, now clearly aware of the significance of Angela's statement, appeared to struggle with his next steps. His body language conveyed embarrassment and a sudden awareness of accountability. Angela continued to stand quietly, her posture straight, her expression composed. She had turned a moment of potential humiliation into one of empowerment, simply by remaining calm and communicating strategically. Passengers nearby began to whisper among themselves, some commenting on the officer's reaction, others on Angela's remarkable composure. It was clear that the balance of power had shifted. What had begun as a routine airport encounter had become a lesson in dignity, respect, and the importance of standing up calmly for oneself. Angela felt a sense of quiet pride, knowing that she had handled the situation in a way that reflected her values and principles. After a few minutes, the airline representative ensured that the officer understood the importance of respectful conduct. The officer, now visibly humbled, nodded and complied, his earlier dismissive attitude replaced with a more careful, professional demeanor. Angela observed silently, allowing the resolution to unfold without further interference. She had done her part, the rest was now in capable hands. As the tension eased, Angela took a deep breath and allowed herself a small smile. She had navigated a challenging situation with grace, ensuring that respect and fairness were maintained. The officer, who had initially treated her with disrespect, had now learned an important lesson about authority, accountability, and the power of calm composure. The passengers around them began to return to their routines, though some continued to glance at Angela with quiet admiration. She had not shouted, not caused a scene, yet she had clearly demonstrated strength and dignity. Her actions had set an example, showing that respect could be demanded through composure and clear communication rather than aggression. Angela adjusted her bag and continued toward her gate, her steps measured and confident. She had faced an uncomfortable and unfair situation, but she had emerged with her dignity intact and had ensured that accountability was enforced. The officer, now fully aware of the consequences of his behavior, had been corrected professionally, and the atmosphere in the terminal returned to its normal rhythm. As she approached her gate, Angela reflected on the events of the morning. She had experienced tension, subtle humiliation, and a moment of fear, but she had handled it with grace and intelligence. By remaining composed, contacting her husband, and allowing the airline to address the situation, she had turned a potentially negative experience into a demonstration of quiet strength and effectiveness. Angela reached her seat near the boarding area and placed her suitcase beside her. She felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The officer had learned a lesson, the airline had acted responsibly, and she had maintained her dignity throughout the encounter. She allowed herself a brief moment to relax, observing the planes on the tarmac and the passengers moving through the terminal. Today had been more than just a routine airport experience. It had been a lesson in patience, composure, and strategic action. Angela had faced a challenging situation and responded with calm authority, showing that strength could be quiet yet powerful. She felt proud of her actions and confident in the knowledge that she had handled everything with integrity and grace. Angela stood near her gate, her suitcase resting quietly at her side. The tension from earlier had mostly settled, but a quiet hum of awareness lingered in the air. Passengers glanced around, some with curiosity, others with a subtle admiration for the way she had handled herself. She remained composed, calm, and confident, observing how the situation was unfolding. The officer, now fully aware of the implications of Angela's revelation, was approached by the airport security supervisor. The supervisor was a tall, professional figure with a calm but authoritative presence. "Officer," he said, his voice steady and polite, "we need to review your conduct earlier this morning. Please come with me." The officer looked hesitant, realizing that his behavior had been noticed and that accountability was unavoidable. He nodded reluctantly, the weight of embarrassment clear in his expression. Angela watched silently. She had no need to gloat or speak further, the situation was being handled properly. Her calm presence had already communicated more than words ever could. She knew that the officer would now understand the importance of respect and professional behavior, and she felt satisfied that the matter was being addressed. The supervisor led the officer away, speaking quietly but firmly. Angela could see the change in the officer's demeanor. His previous confidence had been replaced by humility and reflection. He understood now that his actions had consequences, and that unfair behavior toward passengers, no matter how small, would not be ignored. Nearby, a few passengers whispered among themselves. "Did you see that?" one asked quietly. "She handled that so well. And now he's being corrected without any shouting or scene." Another nodded. "It's impressive how calm she stayed. It really shows strength." Angela overheard a few comments, but she did not respond. She remained composed, letting her actions and demeanor speak for themselves. The airline representative returned to Angela once the officer had been escorted away. "The matter has been addressed," they said politely. "The officer will undergo a formal review, and steps will be taken to ensure this does not happen again. Thank you for handling this calmly and professionally." Angela smiled slightly. "Thank you for your support," she replied. "I'm glad the situation can be resolved respectfully." Angela felt a sense of relief, knowing that justice had been served without confrontation. She had turned a difficult and potentially humiliating situation into one of dignity and empowerment. Her composure, patience, and strategic thinking had made a significant difference, not only for herself but for others who might face similar challenges in the future. As she walked toward her gate, she reflected on the events of the morning. The officer's initial behavior had been unfair and hurtful, yet she had managed to stay calm and take control. By calling her husband and allowing the airline to intervene, she had ensured that respect and professionalism were restored. Her actions had demonstrated that standing up for oneself did not require anger or aggression, but instead could be achieved through quiet determination and thoughtful strategy. Passengers continued to board their flights, some glancing at Angela as she moved through the terminal. She noticed a few people nodding subtly in acknowledgement of her composure and strength. The experience had not only empowered her but had also made a visible impression on others. It was a reminder that dignity and patience often leave a lasting impact, even in brief encounters. Meanwhile, the officer had been taken aside to meet with airport security and airline management. He was instructed to review his behavior, acknowledge his mistake, and participate in additional training on professional conduct and sensitivity. The officer, visibly humbled, listened attentively, recognizing the importance of maintaining respect for all passengers, regardless of background. This formal process ensured that the incident would not be forgotten and that accountability was reinforced. Back at her gate, Angela noticed the boarding announcement for her flight. She wheeled her suitcase toward the gate counter, her steps steady and confident. The airline staff greeted her politely, smiling with recognition and respect. She thanked them quietly, appreciating their professionalism and support throughout the situation. The entire experience had demonstrated the importance of a calm, coordinated response in moments of tension. As she took her seat near the boarding area, Angela allowed herself a moment to relax. Her heart was steady, and a sense of accomplishment filled her. She had faced an uncomfortable and unfair encounter, yet she had handled it with grace and intelligence. The officer had been corrected, the airline had acted responsibly, and she had maintained her dignity throughout. It was a powerful reminder that patience, composure, and strategic thinking could turn difficult situations into opportunities for empowerment. Passengers continued to move through the terminal, some glancing at Angela with quiet admiration. She felt a sense of pride, not from superiority, but from knowing that she had acted in a way that reflected her values. She had shown that respect could be demanded through calm confidence and thoughtful action, rather than loud confrontation. Her quiet strength had left a lasting impression, both on the officer and on those who witnessed the exchange. As she waited for her boarding call, Angela reflected on the lessons of the morning. She had experienced tension, subtle humiliation, and the challenge of maintaining composure in a difficult situation. Yet, by remaining calm, contacting her husband, and allowing the airline to handle the matter professionally, she had turned a negative experience into a demonstration of dignity and empowerment. It was a reminder that true strength often lies in patience, quiet confidence, and strategic action. The officer, meanwhile, completed his review and returned to his duties with a renewed understanding of respect and professionalism. He approached passengers more carefully, his tone polite and measured. It was clear that he had learned from the encounter, and that the airport environment would be safer and more respectful as a result. Angela felt a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that her actions had contributed to positive change. When the boarding call for her flight echoed through the terminal, Angela stood, adjusted her scarf, and wheeled her suitcase toward the gate. Her steps were steady and confident, reflecting the inner calm she had maintained throughout the incident. As she handed her boarding pass to the attendant and walked down the jet bridge, she felt a sense of triumph not from conflict, but from having handled the situation with intelligence, patience, and dignity. On the plane, Angela found her seat and settled in, placing her carry-on in the overhead compartment. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to relax fully for the first time that morning. The sun shone brightly through the window, illuminating the interior of the plane and reflecting the clarity and calm she now felt. She knew that she had acted correctly, and that respect and fairness had been restored without compromising her integrity. Passengers around her prepared for departure, some reading, some talking quietly, and some observing the airport staff and crew. Angela allowed herself a small smile, thinking about how calm, composed action could create meaningful change. She had faced an unfair situation, yet she had transformed it into a moment of quiet empowerment, demonstrating the importance of dignity, patience, and thoughtful strategy. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Angela reflected on the morning's events one last time. She had turned tension and potential humiliation into a demonstration of composure and quiet strength. The officer had been corrected, the airline had acted responsibly, and she had maintained her dignity throughout. It was a reminder that true power often lies not in authority or position, but in calm, strategic action and the courage to uphold one's principles. Angela settled back in her seat, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Today had been more than just a flight, it had been a lesson in patience, courage, and the importance of standing up calmly for oneself. She had faced a challenging situation and responded with quiet authority, showing that strength could be gentle yet powerful. She was proud of her actions and confident that she had handled everything with integrity and grace. The plane lifted off the runway, soaring into the sky. Angela watched the terminal shrink below her, the buildings and people becoming smaller with each passing moment. She felt a sense of freedom and relief. The morning's tension had transformed into a powerful reminder of what could be achieved through composure, patience, and strategic action. Her journey, both literally and figuratively, was a testament to the quiet power of dignity and respect. Angela settled into her seat on the plane, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The events of the morning played back in her mind, each moment vivid and clear. She thought about the tension in the airport, the officer's inappropriate comments, and the quiet way she had taken control of the situation. Despite the initial discomfort, she felt proud of how she had maintained her dignity and composure. Today had been more than just a travel experience, it had been a lesson in patience, strategy, and quiet strength. As she gazed out the window at the tarmac below, Angela reflected on the reactions of the passengers around her. Some had witnessed the exchange, while others had sensed the shift in atmosphere. She remembered the small nods of acknowledgement and the quiet whispers of admiration. It was reassuring to know that composure and calm action could leave a lasting impression, even on strangers. Strength, she realized, often came not from loud words or displays of power, but from thoughtful, deliberate actions. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, the engines humming steadily beneath her feet. Angela adjusted her seatbelt and leaned back slightly, allowing herself to relax fully for the first time that morning. The officer, she knew, had been corrected and was now under review. The airline had acted responsibly, ensuring that the situation would not repeat itself. Angela felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that fairness and respect had been restored without confrontation or anger. She thought about her husband, Marcus, and how his calm authority had made such a difference. Just hearing his voice on the phone had reassured her and given her the confidence to navigate the situation. Marcus had always been a source of strength and support, and today had reminded her of the importance of having allies who could help ensure fairness and accountability. She smiled quietly, grateful for his presence in her life. As the plane gained speed and lifted off the runway, Angela watched the airport shrink below her. The buildings, the crowds, and the tension of the morning were becoming smaller with each passing moment. She felt a lightness in her chest, a release from the stress and discomfort she had endured. The events that had once seemed heavy and challenging now felt like lessons she could carry forward. She had demonstrated that patience, composure, and strategic thinking could turn a potentially negative experience into a moment of empowerment. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, ensuring that all passengers were comfortable and prepared for the journey ahead. Angela observed their professionalism and dedication, appreciating the calm efficiency with which they managed the cabin. She realized that the morning's events had not only tested her own composure but had also highlighted the importance of respect and professionalism in every interaction. Small gestures of politeness and careful communication could make a significant difference in any environment. Angela reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. She liked to write down her reflections during travel, capturing her thoughts and feelings while they were fresh. She began to jot down notes about the morning, describing the incident, her reactions, and the lessons she had learned. Writing helped her process her experiences and gave her clarity. As she wrote, she felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that she had handled the situation with grace and intelligence. The passengers around her were settling into their own routines. Some read books or watched screens, while others engaged in quiet conversation. Angela noticed a mother gently comforting her child, a young man adjusting his headphones, and a couple sharing a quiet laugh. The normal rhythm of travel continued, and she felt a sense of harmony in the small details of life around her. It reminded her that challenges were often temporary, and calm reflection could bring clarity and peace. Angela's thoughts returned to the officer. She considered the subtle but important lessons he had learned. He had faced accountability for his actions, and the airport environment had been reminded of the importance of respect and fairness. Angela felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her composure had contributed to a positive outcome, not only for herself but for the larger community of passengers who relied on a safe and respectful travel experience. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Angela gazed out at the clouds below. The sun illuminated their edges, creating a soft, glowing landscape. She marveled at the beauty of the sky, feeling a sense of perspective. The morning's tension, the embarrassment, and the confrontation now seemed small compared to the vastness of the world around her. She felt a sense of freedom, knowing that she had faced difficulty with integrity and had emerged stronger. She reflected on the qualities that had guided her through the morning: patience, calmness, strategic thinking, and self-respect. Each of these traits had been essential in transforming a potentially negative encounter into a moment of empowerment. Angela realized that these qualities could be applied to many areas of life, not just travel. Whether in personal relationships, professional environments, or unexpected challenges, maintaining composure and acting thoughtfully could make a meaningful difference. As she closed her notebook and tucked it back into her bag, Angela felt a renewed sense of confidence. She had handled the situation without anger, without escalation, and without compromise to her dignity. The officer had been corrected, the airline had acted responsibly, and she had demonstrated the power of calm authority. The experience had reinforced her belief in the importance of patience, integrity, and thoughtful action in the face of unfairness. Angela glanced around the cabin, noticing the subtle interactions among passengers. A few smiled politely at her, perhaps remembering the earlier tension at the airport. She returned their smiles, acknowledging their awareness with quiet grace. These small connections reminded her that even brief encounters could leave lasting impressions when approached with composure and kindness. The flight attendants passed through the aisle once more, checking on passengers and ensuring their comfort. Angela appreciated their attentiveness and professionalism, recognizing that respect and care were essential in every interaction. She felt a sense of harmony, observing how small acts of attention and responsibility contributed to a safe and pleasant environment for everyone. Angela leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes briefly. She thought about the morning's challenges and how she had navigated them successfully. The officer's inappropriate comments, the moment of embarrassment, and the tension in the airport had all been transformed into an opportunity for empowerment. She had acted calmly, strategically, and with dignity, ensuring that fairness and respect were maintained. As she opened her eyes and looked out the window again, Angela felt a sense of clarity. The journey ahead, both literal and figurative, seemed lighter and more promising. She had learned that composure, patience, and thoughtful action could turn difficult situations into moments of growth and empowerment. She felt grateful for the lessons learned and confident in her ability to face future challenges with strength and grace. The plane continued its smooth journey through the sky, the clouds stretching endlessly below. Angela felt a sense of peace, knowing that the events of the morning had been handled with intelligence and dignity. The officer had faced accountability, the airline had acted responsibly, and she had maintained her self-respect throughout. It was a reminder that even in moments of tension and discomfort, calm, thoughtful action could lead to positive outcomes. As the hours passed, Angela reflected on the broader lessons of the experience. She considered the importance of standing up calmly for oneself, the value of patience in the face of unfairness, and the impact of thoughtful communication. She understood that true strength often lay not in aggression or confrontation, but in composure, clarity, and strategic action. When the captain announced the approach to the destination, Angela felt a sense of satisfaction. The journey had not only been a flight through the sky but also a journey of personal growth and empowerment. She prepared to disembark with the same calm confidence she had maintained throughout the morning, knowing that she had handled every aspect of the situation with dignity and integrity. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Angela gathered her belongings. She reflected one last time on the morning's events. The tension, the unfair treatment, and the moment of discomfort had all been transformed into a demonstration of quiet strength. She had maintained her composure, ensured accountability, and left a lasting impression on those who had witnessed her actions. When she finally stepped off the plane, Angela felt a renewed sense of confidence and empowerment. The airport behind her, the flight completed, she knew that she had handled a challenging situation with grace and intelligence. She had turned a moment of tension into a lesson in patience, composure, and strategic action, a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life.